Hello, everybody. I'll wait for people to get in.
Yeah, I would give people a little time.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot we can see.
Yeah. I usually give it until about 2 minutes after, just to give people, everyone time to sign on.
Makes sense.
And then people will start coming in a little late too, and we can edit this part of the recording out.
That's fine.
Oh, Alex, don't forget about putting questions in the chat so that we have a record of them for later.
Absolutely.
If you can ask for that, yeah. So it's 11:02. I think you might want to start any time now, and then just let people come in as they come in.
Sounds good. Alrighty, well, hello, everybody. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, my name is Alex Salgo, and I'm lucky enough to be CSearch's head chair this year. And we actually also will have an opening greeting from Hassam. So I'm going to pass you over to him. He's the head of the Queen's Computing Department, and he's going to say a quick hello.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see all of you here, though virtually, at this CSearch conference, the competing conference for students by students. So the conference expanded from Queens a couple of years ago, and I'm glad to see it a great success. I would leave all the conference information and all the details to Alex. When it goes back to him, the organizing committee had done a wonderful job. So I'll just acknowledge Alex, Emily, Colton, Maram, and Alice. You have done a wonderful job, and we are so proud of you. I would like also to acknowledge the support of CSCAN and all the work that they have done in organizing this event. Finally, I wish you all a very successful conference. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Hassan. So again, welcome everybody to day 2 of our conference. We've got a lot of exciting stuff planned today. We have a couple of presentation sessions from a variety of students from all over different subfields of computer science. We also have a workshop coming up later on how to take care of your mental health during a very different year in all of our lives. And we'll be capping off the day with our live poster session where you'll be able to mingle and speak with other researchers one-on-one, just like at an in-person conference. But before all of that, we'll be starting off our day with our second keynote speaker, Shannon-Vanstone. Sherry's a cryptographer, a mathematician, an entrepreneur, and she's been a part of multiple successful startups, and she's the recent founder of a new company, Profound Impact. So today she's come to talk to us about her career journey, how she's achieved everything that I've mentioned, and what Profound Impact is doing. One thing I'll just mention to you, if anyone has any questions during the talk, just post them in the chat rather than the Q&A so we can keep track of all of them. And without further ado, Sherry, I'm going to pass things over to you to get started.
Thank you. Make sure that I will start sharing now. Can everyone see? Can you see my screen?
Looks good to me.
Great. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. It's my privilege to be speaking with you and talking with you about a subject that the title I've chosen is Charting Your Course. It's the journey, not the destination. It's not letting me switch to the next slide. So I'm going to, yeah, sorry about that. 2020, wow. If you look back at this time last year, how many of us had different plans for 2020? I know I did. 2020 is a perfect example of a detour in life. And I don't mean to make light of anything that has happened so far in 2020. For more than 1 million people, it's been more than a detour. But for us who are fortunate to be healthy and relatively unscathed, this year has put many obstacles in our way. Yet we continue our journey. I'm going to talk to you today about how you can enjoy your journey more by embracing the detours that can happen in your life, and how to recognize when it's time to take a break, a rest stop, know when you should move on, know when to take a longer break, and maybe even when to change destinations altogether. First and foremost, you have to start from someplace. Many of you may know exactly where you plan to go with your career. You have it all figured out. I was not one of those students. If you would look at a map of my journey, you would start, and I'm going to try to find it on here, Ohio. I grew up in Ohio. I went to Miami University of Ohio. Then I went to Costa Rica. More on that later. I was to study Spanish and prepare for missionary work. Spoiler alert, I flunked out. Then to Tennessee to finish my undergrad, and farther east to University of Tennessee to finish a graduate degree. Then I went up to Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area to work for the US government as a cryptologic mathematician. Then I went to California, Silicon Valley, where I worked for a startup in information security. I changed from a technical position to business development. And then I had an opportunity to travel all through Asia, from New Zealand to Japan for 6 years. And then I moved to Canada up here, and I worked in Mississauga, Ontario, with a startup company called Certicom. Then I went to MasterCard in New York, where I had an opportunity to travel all around the US, Europe, back in Asia. And after a year, I came back to Canada for consulting and 3 more startups. And now I'm here. Wow. Maybe all of this movement has helped me to recognize the value of detours. But it was actually a person closer to me that changed, that helped their desire to change, that introduced me to mathematics as a child. Now, my father was an operating engineer. That's blue collar, hard work. And he wanted to become an electrical engineer. So my father signed up for these mail-in courses. So it's called the International Correspondence School. Now, this was the ultimate in virtual learning, but of course not online. So you got to study book, you studied it, you took the exam, you put the exam in a mailed it off, and then you started on the next one, or maybe waited till you got your results, and then you would pick up the next work study book and then go through it and then just continue. Now, I was in grade 2 when my father started taking these courses, and I got curious about them, and I started working through the courses with them. By the time I wrote my standardized test in the 5th grade, my math scores were over the top. And my teacher was thrilled to share with me that I had scored at the 10th level, grade level in mathematics. Now, would I have discovered mathematics on my own without my father's desire to change his destination and his encouragement? Maybe. But because I showed such aptitude at a young age, I received the encouragement and assistance from teachers, my high school teachers, that helped me move along my journey. But my first detour started when I went to university at Miami of Ohio. My first, I think it was the 2nd week of classes. Now, I was sure I wanted to study mathematics, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Would I teach? I'm going to become an accountant. At that time, I did not realize that mathematics is about letters and accounting is about numbers. But I thought, I'll be an accountant. So I signed up all my classes to be an accountant. Luckily, I was also interested in journalism and became a reporter for the university newspaper. And what did I have in the first 2 weeks? I had an opportunity to interview the university president. So after the interview, he asked me to share a little bit about myself. He took the time to listen to my interests, and I told him that I was studying to be an accountant. And he continued to ask me questions. Eventually, he asked me about my university entrance exam scores. And when I told him my score, especially in mathematics, he said, no, you shouldn't be an accountant. You should be a mathematician. And with my permission, he went and changed all my courses and started me on my journey in mathematics. And because I was open to what the road ahead could be, I listened. And I let him change all those courses. But that one conversation led me to change my entire direction. So I go on to study mathematics at Miami University of Ohio. But then I decided, I don't know, maybe I want to be a missionary. Okay, I know that's a little out there, but I went to Costa Rica and studied Spanish on my way to be a missionary with tennis racket in hand. And I did, and after a while, I realized that I love Spanish, but I am not going to be a missionary. So I flunked out of missionary school. I returned to the US to finish my undergraduate now in mathematics and Spanish. So I'm thinking, you know, I did want to be a teacher, and I'd all been influenced by wonderful teachers in high school and some in undergraduate. So as I was working to finish my undergraduate now, as I said, in mathematics and Spanish to get 2 degrees, I was working as an editor for a multilingual magazine, a multi-language magazine, including Spanish, while I was going to school. But to be a teacher, I needed to do student teaching, which was required by that university. And I would have to quit my job, a job I truly enjoyed. So I said, you know what, why don't I do the mandatory observation, which is a week. You go into the high school for a week and you observe. Oh my, after that week, I said, I want to be a teacher, but not a high school teacher. I just didn't have the patience for it. So I spoke with one of my professors and he recommended, well, what do you know, after I told him, okay, I want to be a teacher, what do you suggest? He goes, go on, get a graduate degree, get a PhD, teach at the university level. So I said, okay, I applied to graduate school. Now, back in the 80s, there were some who suggested grad school was wasted on a woman. And in fact, one of my math professors, undergrad professors, told me that not to do that, because I'd just be taking a spot that a man would, you know, from a man, and when all I was looking for was a husband, not a career. Yeah, I was a little shocked, but I ignored him. I didn't listen to him. I didn't tune into that frequency. I listened to my own inner voice that I knew I had to follow that passion. And I want you students to do the same. I was also incredibly fortunate to have teachers, professors, and others who watched over me along the way and guided me to other applications for my passions and talents all through my career. So along this journey, my advice to you is to be flexible, not rigid, to be open, not closed, and certainly be curious. And additionally, seek out the mentors who will encourage and challenge you and give them greater heed than those who will discourage you. And also remember, when you're back on course and doing well in your career, be sure to pay it forward and help and mentor others. So I continued on in school, and after completing my master's degree, I started thinking, should I go on and get my PhD? Now, the University of Tennessee paid me a small salary as a graduate teaching assistant, and it waived my tuition. But because I did do some tutoring, but that was it. I didn't have an outside job. I was poor. And I thought, okay, I've been poor for a long time. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to get my PhD. I'm going to look and see what I can do in the job market. So I went out to the job market, and at the university, they were always companies were coming in and interviewing. And I interviewed with IBM and went to Texas to interview with them. I interviewed with 3 or 4 other companies that wanted me to become an engineer and said that they would send me back to school to become an engineer. But I wanted to work in mathematics. I wanted to use mathematics. And I knew I didn't want to teach high school. So I said, okay, what can I do? So I accepted a role with the US government. That was awesome because it was a role I could use my mathematics every day. I learned about encryption and security and cryptography. Now, I was in a unique program. They recruited every year, they recruited 24 to 25, 26 people in this unique program. Everyone had a master's at least. Some had PhDs. Some had studied cryptography, where I had not. I had studied mathematics, specifically in statistics area. And interesting, there were the same number of women as there were men. So there were probably 13 women, 13 men in this program. And we were a cohort for 3 years. So we took cryptography and related classes for the first 6 weeks, and then we chose where we wanted to go in the organization. So we in theory, we went and spent 6 months in a department, and then we would leave and go to another department. And in that, we'd also be taking courses while we were working in these departments. So we had an opportunity over this 3 years to have 6 months, six months assignment. And we had the opportunity to work from constructing cryptographic algorithms to trying to break others. And it was a unique opportunity, as I said, because it was a mathematician using mathematics every day. And a lot of people don't understand that cryptography is based on what we call hard mathematical problems. And of course, I wrote code to test out my theories, but in one of the departments, I was surrounded by computer scientists who correctly pointed out that I was not a coder. However, I did eventually write some code that was deployed operationally. I had an opportunity to work on many, many challenging projects, from voice recognition projects to classified projects. And I even had an opportunity to teach 2 courses to one of the next cohorts in the same program, getting my teaching fix. And it was exciting work, especially where I ended up with after about 3 years I graduated from the program, and about the 4th year, I moved into this job, liaison with the department, where there was a role for liaisoning with the State Department. And so I could use my mathematics, I still was doing that, but then I had an opportunity to expand and have more external and interpersonal communications and develop my skills. I received 2 promotions in 2 years. So I loved the work, I was successful, I was effective. I traveled a lot, so I went on a trip with my boss's boss, and during the trip sometime he said, "Sherry, you know that to move up in this organization, you're gonna have to leave this department." Now, what he was saying indirectly, that was my direct boss had been in his position for a long time, and he wasn't going anywhere. He was gonna retire, and he did retire in that position. So since I knew that I had to leave the department, and the other work in the organization outside that department was not as exciting for me. So I decided not only to leave that department, I left the US government, and I went to California to work for a startup. I changed from a technical job to a business development with the startup. And I want to say that I did get to use some of my mathematics because it was still information security. And I even was able to work on some cryptographic algorithms while I was there. But my main job was business development and selling and information equipment. In fact, it was hardware. So my experience with cryptography, with that experience, I knew exactly what the equipment did. I could talk about the bits and bytes going across the communication line. I could tell you what happened to those bits and bytes, that they were being encrypted. I could tell you the level of encryption. I could tell you the protocols and the handshakes and all of that. And I also knew how to talk to the customer because I'd been working on the communication and interpersonal skills. So I had this opportunity to travel all around Asia Pacific for 6 years, from Japan to New Zealand, working with 13 different cultures, setting up distribution channels for our security products, which we sold to IBM, Intel, Caterpillar, Citibank, etc. Now, I traveled alone, which I found out over the years was unusual for a woman to do in Asia Pacific. But in Japan, where my background with US government provided the credentials, it allowed me to be quite successful. I was able to be effective with the companies that I dealt with, which were, I would say, no women, all male. Now, those in those companies. Then one time, one of the Japanese men that I was dealing with said to me, jokingly, I believe, "Sherry-san, you must be a man," because they didn't know how to deal with me. They didn't see me as a Japanese woman, and they knew I wasn't a Western man, so they just couldn't figure out I was an anomaly. But sadly to say that Sherry-san, you must be a man, was somewhat of a compliment. was as because women were not treated as equal during that time in many cultures that I worked with. When I first went to Korea, I worked with an engineer who spoke little English, and I spoke no Korean. So after a while, he got comfortable enough with me. He said to me, "You know, a woman can't be an engineer." And I laughed and I said, "Is that right? Good thing that I'm a mathematician." However, I must say, it was challenging work. It was great work, but traveling by myself and opening up this area for my company, I felt at times as if I was taking one step forward and two steps backward. You may have experiences like this where it feels like you're standing still, but you're not. You're still making progress, still learning. So in spite of the way I felt about the one step forward and two steps back, I did make progress, increasing sales by 20-fold in less than 20 years. And I spent 6 years with this company, and I loved that job. But at headquarters in Silicon Valley, the culture was quite toxic. So I decided to leave and find an opportunity where I could help mold the culture of the organization. I want to talk a little bit more about toxic cultures. At the US government, when I worked there, I worked with a lot of men and women. And there was a time, and I would say it was not toxic, but there were times when I had to stand up, and in particular to one of a male boss, and certainly senior and older than I. And I just finally said, "You don't ever speak to me in that tone again." And he was taken aback, and guess what? He continued to speak to others in a demeaning manner, but not to me. So at this Silicon Valley startup, which was a male-dominated management, and the president was quite chauvinistic and demeaning to everyone, male and female, I was one of the few in the company who would stand up to him. He and I had several public discussions. I'll call them that to be polite. In the end, I could stand up to him, but I knew the culture was too toxic. I tried to keep my team members away from the toxicity as much as possible. However, I was not senior enough in the company to change the culture for everyone. So given the experience that I've had, and now having with you, with recent graduates, and hopefully you too as students, your generation is less tolerant with this toxicity and demand a positive, engaging culture. And that is great. Now, there are times when you need to know when it may be time to change direction or course and correct and carry on. So no matter how much you enjoy a specific destination, as I did with this company in Silicon Valley, at some point, you may need to make the decision to move on. So I came to Canada to work as a VP of Sales and Marketing for Certicom, a competitor of the Silicon Valley company. Now, at Certicom, they were a University of Waterloo spinoff, and they had their offices in Mississauga, Ontario. And there, I believed I would be able to influence the culture. I was one of, I think there were only 8 other employees when I joined. And it was early days. Again, I was able to use my mathematics. We were introducing a new a new cryptographic algorithm to compete with RSA, which was the leading public key cryptography system. And this algorithm was the elliptic curve cryptography, or ECC. And it was early days, and we were commercializing, standardizing, and because ECC was perfect for mobile applications, because it was faster than RSA, less computational intensive, less bandwidth, and it used less battery for all of its computations. So again, my background in mathematics was foundational for me, even in a sales and marketing role. However, it took years to standardize and commercialize, and again, we were making progress fast enough, but probably not enough for me, because we could do better. So I had to tell myself every day, or not every day, but many days, you must act enthusiastic, Sherry, to be enthusiastic. So we continued on. Now, even before Certicom became successful, it went public in 1995. And by that time, the founder of Certicom, the co-founder of Certicom, Dr. Scott Vanstone, and I became romantically involved. Now, the company continued to make great strides. They were hiring people, new management was coming in. And although I had been in the information security industry for over 15 years, I resigned in 1997 because of the appearance of nepotism and because of my relationship with the founder and board member, Shannon-Vanstone. So I decided I'll take a job elsewhere. So I took a position with MasterCard International in New York as a VP of Electronic Commerce, deploying a secure transactions protocol for online commerce. Well, at least we tried to do so. The environment wasn't right. The banks weren't ready for it, and the merchants weren't ready for it, and the consumers weren't quite ready to go and put their credit card online. But I did get to spend a year traveling to New York, US. I lived in Toronto, Mississauga, and traveled to New York, US, Europe, and Asia. But after all that travel and being away from home for a long period of time, I decided I needed to take a break. So I decided to take that break. Now, I had never taken a break besides vacation since I had been in graduate school. Right out of graduate school, I graduated and I taught a summer course, and then I went and started working with the US government. I left the US government, and a week later I was in California working for the Silicon Valley startup. And then I took a weekend off between the Silicon Valley startup and Certicom. So, and then I went immediately to MasterCard. I didn't take any time off. So I decided it was time to take a time off. Not really sure how long the break would be. I decided, okay, I'll do a little consulting. And Scott and I were moving into our new house in Campbellville, Ontario. So I said, great, I'll play house. So at some time in your future, you may decide to take a break for personal reasons and maybe dedicate, to, I'm going to go back one more. Sorry. To dedicate to your family or non-career related dream, or maybe to help someone you love make their own dreams come true. For me, I'd put my career on hold, but I didn't really think of it that way at the time, and took on a secondary role of sorts so I could support my husband, Scott, to achieve his dream. Now, but it turned out to be a dream for both of us. Together, he in the forefront and I supporting him, we built Certicom, and BlackBerry purchased the company in 2009. We soon would have the freedom to pursue new dreams. But by knowing when to step back and stop and take a break from my career, eventually, years later, led me into a new leadership role. Now, when we sold Certicom, a lot of people thought we had reached the ultimate destination. We could comfortably retire. But we weren't ready to sit back and relax, so we continued with BlackBerry. I was doing some part-time non-technical work, event management, etc. But I left in 2011. Scott left in 2012. So we thought, okay, we've reached the ultimate destination. We could comfortably retire. But guess what? We weren't ready to sit back and retire. We thought about it and we said, you know what? We're comfortable, but we want to give back. We want to make some significant donations to several initiatives. And we also believe that this technology that we help develop and commercialize and standardize could be used in different applications besides the mobile and cellular applications. So we started a company called TrustPoint Innovation. And we believed that there was an opportunity in the IoT space for the same very efficient bandwidth, all of the reasons that it's good for mobile would be good for constrained environments such as the IoT environments and devices. And in particular, we were notified by the US government that they had chosen Scott's technology and protocols for their new crash avoidance system that would soon be mandated for all automobiles to be deployed and sold in the US. So we thought, oh, this is perfect. And we started the company, and we were working with the US Department of Transportation and started working with other automotive companies. But in 2014, Scott passed away, but I continued in the helm of TrustPoint, putting myself into the company that we started together, And as I mentioned, we were working with the U.S. Department of Transportation, and then we started working with what's called Tier 1s. They're the people who supply directly to the automotive manufacturers, such as Ford, GM, BMW. And we also worked with Transport Canada to adapt the U.S. system for use in Canada. But in 2017, I made the decision to sell TrustPoint. The reason I did this was, one, we had grown and we were interested, we were being noted, we were working with Tier 1s, we were working with the US government, the Canadian government, but with the OEMs, we found that the liability that we would have to take on in any contract with them was almost crippling for a startup, for a small company as us. So I came to agreement to sell the company to Robert Bosch, which is a German private corporation. For that, that was one of the reasons. The second reason was that Robert Bosch was 97% owned by a foundation. And that means 97% of the profits went to build hospitals and schools around the world. So it aligned with my core values. Third thing was that they had previously purchased that German company, who I knew all the founders of that company. And because they also were mathematicians in the crypto space. And then the other one was that the local office that they had set up was managed by one of my late husband's academic children, Dave McFarland. So for those reasons, I sold the company, and I spent a year as a transition. So on March the 31st, 2018, I officially retired. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't. I just rewired. Now, I grew up in the US. My family's still there. My sister has a doctorate in education, and she had been a superintendent of schools and worked with many organizations in secondary, in high school and junior high. And my sister, when my late husband passed away, she said, I want to write a book about him because he inspires me so much. Because Scott had this ability to go in to high schools and recruit students to come and study mathematics at the University of Waterloo. And what he did was he could identify their talent and aptitude even before maybe they even recognized it. And so she said, I want to write this book about him. And I said, fine, go ahead. So she started this book around 2014, 2015, interviewing Scott's students, his academic children, meaning the students that had PhD and master's degrees with him. She interviewed colleagues, she interviewed siblings of Scott's. And so she had this book started. So when I retired in 2018, she sent all the files to me and said, okay, you finish the book. And I'm going, She was my older sister. She told me what to do a lot in my life. So I kind of, but finally I just said, after a while I thought about it. I said, this is not my vision. And furthermore, this story is not static. This is a dynamic story. It's not a story that you can put in a book, a static book. This is a dynamic story because Scott's impact is still being told. It's still being written with his academic children and his academic grandchildren and their children and his colleagues. And in fact, everyone that was at the University of Waterloo math faculty, their story and their impact, that Scott's academic grandfather was Bill Tutt and what his work that he did. This was more than just one person's story. This was a impactful story that needed to be told. So Profound Impact, the company that I'm with now, we focus on securely connecting people to help them become aware of their undiscovered relationships and to share stories that show how they've made individual and collective profound impact on the world. We work with research institutions and research universities to not only collect the data about the impact, but to visualize that data in interesting and dynamic and inspiring ways, so that not only just to show the historical perspective, but to provide a platform for collaboration for future impact and help solve some of the world's greatest problems. So I can honestly say that my journey has introduced me to opportunities and success because I remained open to new ideas and new roads along the way. And as you can tell, I've been through a lot of journeys that I didn't even include in this talk today. But as you move forward through your academic journey and into your career, I want to remind you of that old expression that in life, it's about the journey, not the destination. So whatever decisions you make along the way, even though you may think you may have made a mistake or a wrong turn, each decision you may lead you to a new and unexpected wonderful stop along the way. Now, each experience will teach you something worth learning if you let it. If I'd have stayed on my original course and become an accountant, I'm sure I would have been successful. Maybe, or maybe not, without as many detours, rest stops, or longer breaks. I just know I wouldn't, I just know I would not have been exactly where I am today. It would have been a different journey. So what's next on your journey? I just want you to enjoy it. Thank you for your time today, spending it with me and hearing about my mathematics and entrepreneurial journey. Please feel free to reach out to me. Good afternoon.
Thank you very, very much, Sherry. It was an excellent presentation, and we have a few questions from the chat, so I'll just get a couple of them here for you. So this first question comes from Natalia, and she says, thank you for the great talk. Do you have any advice to deal with the uncertainty if you made the right decision to move on from somewhere?
I think that's the thing, is that if you trust you need to trust yourself in all of this. I believe that that's being true to yourself and your core values. If you find any place that you're at, that there's a reason that you're going, I'm doing my best. I don't mean, I do believe in perseverance and persistence and making sure you do everything you can where you're at to do the best job. But when you say, my core values don't align, or something doesn't align right, there is uncertainty and there is risk, and I can't take that away from you. That's part of the journey. You know, if you do make a mistake, you could just move on, like most of the time. And you know, I'm trying to think, and I know there are times when I made a huge mistake, but I'll remember that later. But right now, all I know is that it took me on a different journey. But if I'd have stayed there, I gave it enough time. The jobs that I did at least 6 years in almost any of those. And I felt that that was enough time for me to make a difference, and which I did, but I couldn't make enough difference there. So I thought it's better if I move on. And it's really about your own why, your own core values, and making sure that wherever you're at, that they align with yours.
That makes a lot of sense. We got another question here from Santiago asking, what are your thoughts on global justice, or global injustice, and global warming and social injustice? Well, I'm struggling with that one. Is it really okay to take a break when these kinds of issues are so time sensitive and need immediate responses?
I agree. And I think we all should do our part in that. And I think, again, you have to figure out, I believe both of those are big issues. Okay, I'll say that right up front. And but sometimes you can be more effective if you take a break. You can get your own head around it. That break may be a year, maybe not. But in that time, you don't quit living. You don't quit giving and having an impact. You can still contribute in many ways. You can take on different causes. Just because I wasn't in an office as a VP or a CEO during the time that I took my break and supported Scott, I still had a huge role to play, not only in his company, but also, I still was involved with the organization. I was still a member of the International Association of Cryptographic Logic Research, and I still was active. So it wasn't that I just sat on the couch. I was still very, very active. So I still took on causes, and again, I made sure that I was still trying to be impactful. But as far as my career, I took a break, but not a break from being impactful.
That makes sense. And thank you, Santiago, for your question. Now we got a question from Robert here. Is there a point in your life where you feel as though you made the wrong decision or wrong turn? I know a moment ago you said that you do have a couple moments like that.
Yeah, well, I I didn't share every detail of my journey, but I will tell you, people say, oh, you've been so successful. Have you had any failures? Yes, I have. I became a board member of this company, and it was a public company in Toronto. And a shareholder in the company. I knew one of the persons. They convinced me to come on the board. And I went on the board, and it was a digital platform for doctors. And it was a little ahead of its time. But again, security was paramount to it. So this sounds good to me. I'll come on the board. I'll advise them. They then eventually asked me to be CEO, and I took that role on. And I made a huge mistake, not necessarily in taking the role, but not making it fully mine. I didn't bring in my own CFO and my own confidants. I said, oh, I can deal with those people that's there already. Turned out to be a very duplicitous environment. And it was for me, I spent maybe 3 years there, two years, let's say 1 year on the board and 2 years as a CEO. And I was fired. And thank goodness, because I wouldn't play along with the boys. They were all men, management, and on the board, I was the only woman. And I just found it was just, I thought I would, if I had thought they were going to fire me, I might have quit. But anyway, I got fired. So was that a mistake? Yes, it was, but it wasn't necessarily taking the job was a mistake. It was that I should have set the expectations up front. See, there's in life, in taking positions, there's having a responsibility without authority. And I found out along the way that if I'm going to take the responsibility, I better have the authority to do the job. So if I would have made that clear in the negotiations, then that would have set the stage. And I didn't do that. So that was a mistake. But I recovered from it. It didn't hurt my career. No, it was a mistake, but, and I'm not saying that there aren't bigger mistakes than that, but that was the one that I can recall.
I think that's an excellent point, the balance between authority and responsibility there, and trying to make sure you have the right amount of each.
Yes.
We got a few questions here from Lucas, and I'll try and break them up for you here. One of the first questions is, you said you were financially challenged in your college years, just because obviously some of the positions during that don't pay a whole lot. How much has money impacted the decisions in your life and the power to make decisions in your life?
One of the things I did mention along the way that I'm a pretty, I believe in my value, okay? So when I was a graduate student and then, I went to work for the US government, I made X dollars, right? And when I went to Silicon Valley, not only is it more expensive out there in California, I had to say what is my worth? So it's about really doing some homework and figuring out. And I can tell you, I was offered a job that paid more in Silicon Valley, but I did decide to go to this one company. And so money is always, it's there, and it is important, especially when you have to look at the whole thing. Like I'm moving from a low cost of living place such as University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I moved to Baltimore, Washington area. That I had to make sure I made enough money to be able to do that and still put some money aside. And then in California, the same way. So in making those decisions, I had to always look at that. And I always had to figure out, and one of the reasons that I went out of the government, which I didn't mention in my talk, was I realized that I wanted to control my own destiny. And I went into sales because I could control my own money. And I equated those two at the time because I said, you're a salesperson, you get a base and you get commission. And if you do very, very well, that money can be a bigger pot than it was down here at the base salary. So I figured that out and I'm thinking, okay, that was one of the motivations of going into sales was that, the more I work and the more successful I have, the more money I make. Now, I'm not saying that the Silicon Valley company had a different view of it after a while. In fact, they started taking money away from me because I was too successful. So that was one of that duplicitous toxicity, like, wait a minute, I earned it, I should get it. So that helped me. And then when I came to Canada, I was a pretty good negotiator. And being in US dollars, coming to Canada and Canadian dollars, and that. So, and the tax situation here. So money always played in these decisions. Not that it was the most important, but it played in the decisions. And then when I was with Certicom and it became successful and went public, it allowed me to have a lot more flexibility so that I could even start companies, and I could not worry about fundraising right away in those companies. Like with TrustPoint, we did fundraising. Certicom, we did fundraising. You know, what I mean is going out and getting investments, but we knew we had enough money to get to certain goals. And so yes, financial is always in the decision process, but again, it doesn't have to be the most important factor in the decision.
That makes sense. There we go. Another question from Lucas. In terms of impromptu changes, these kind of sudden changes that affect your whole life, things like COVID, loss of family members, and even political kinds of things, how do you cope with that? And I suppose related to your talk, with the impact it has on how you're working.
Well, I must say that especially like when my husband passed away in 2014, I gave this talk at the Perimeter Institute to young aspiring physicists, they're high school students. I talked about Isaac Newton's law, second law, that says a body stays in motion until acted upon by an external force, a negative external force. So when my husband passed away, I thought, you know, at the time, I'll just keep going. It was pretty devastating, of course. And but you know what you do? You put one foot in front of the other, and you, just like when I felt like when I was working in Asia Pacific, and I felt I was doing one step forward and two steps back. Sometimes you feel that way. So you just get up every day, you put one foot in front of the other, and you move forward. And I know a lot of people have been affected. I mentioned the 1 million people who passed, but the people who are living have been affected by COVID-19, and financially and other ways, maybe being separated from the family like I am. You know, I could go see my mother, but I don't want to. What if I carried the, you know, COVID with me from Canada to my mom in Ohio? And, you know, so you feel like, oh, I'm separated from my family. I talk to her a lot on the phone. So you do those things that you can do. And I think that's it. It's just that perseverance and persistence. Like, okay, I have a purpose. I clearly, like my husband and I started this company. I am not going to run this company. I'm going to move forward with the dream that we had. So again, I think it's just being persevering, just hanging in there.
Excellent answer, I think. A next question we have is, have you been planning out your life at every step, or would you just ride the flow and see what's coming up next? Because you said you went all over the world. Do you consider yourself settled down now, or do you still have a long-term plan going forward?
That's a good question. This will be my last venture. I have been in Canada for 26 years. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere, although I did travel and worked for MasterCard and traveled around the world. I did other things during the time I've been here. But I must say that I certainly did not plan this journey. I did know one thing, and I went to Miami, University of Ohio, and it was in pretty much the backyard of where my family lived. I got out of there as soon as I could. I don't know. I just felt that was it. It was not that Miami of Ohio was bad. It was just like I felt the call to move on. Maybe I'm different than other people, but certainly I know I'm different than other people. But saying that, I just felt that I did not want to stay in Ohio. And I don't know what I'm going to do with my future. All my family, as I mentioned, is in the States, except I have a stepdaughter and 2 step grandchildren here. I would not go back to Ohio. I don't know. So anyway, when I was young, I just knew that I wasn't going to be in Ohio, but I didn't have any idea that I'd go to California to work. And you know, and then be in Canada. I never even thought of that. I didn't even know much about Canada. You know, the American students don't know much about Canada. So anyway, but I can tell you, I made the right decision to be in Canada. So given the way I believe Canada's diversity and inclusiveness and all that, I don't see me going back to the US to live. But I don't think I'll be doing very many more ventures. Profound Impact most likely will be my last one. I'll continue doing my philanthropic work.
That makes sense. And I think Canada, we're lucky to be the last ones to end up with you here. Yeah. Now, I want to make sure to give people enough time to move to the next Zoom call, but we do have one last question that before we wrap things up here, and it's another one from Lucas asking, how much has your education impacted your journey? So I guess the specific degree that you ended up taking and everything.
I can tell you that, and that's why I hoped I made that clear. But that foundational degree in any I believe in it, and I do believe the arts are important too, having a degree in Spanish. I do believe the foundational degree that I have in STEM, especially as a woman, opened many, many doors for me. And I mentioned my experience in Japan. If I had not had that degree in mathematics and I had not worked for the US government and had the credentials, I would not have been successful there. Maybe now, maybe it's different, but this was in the 90s, right? So this is a time when that degree opened so many doors for me. And many of those doors had nothing to do with mathematics or technology. Many roles that I've had as sales and marketing CEO. When I was at TrustPoint and Certicom, it was great that I knew the technology and I knew who to hire and not to hire because I've been in the industry long enough. Now with Profound Impact, that's different. I'm not as, it's a little bit, it is not a little bit, it's a lot of ways out of my wheelhouse. But still having that degree in mathematics makes me, what does it do for me? We're problem solvers. We are, we acknowledge, you know, I mean, information, you know, it's about true data, not making it up. It's about logic. It's about, you know, just understanding the foundations of everything. I know when I was in grad school, what did my professor keep telling me? Go back to the basics. And when you have a degree in STEM, you can go back to the basics because it's there. The foundation is there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sherry. Like I said, Canada's been lucky to have you, and I think CSearch has been lucky to have you here as well.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I quite enjoyed it. Thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you everyone in the chat for your questions. We'll give you a few minutes to move over to the next Zoom call and everything like that. And as Sherry mentioned earlier, you posted your email on there, so you have you can reach out if you have further questions later on, I think.